day I kind of formulated this, I thought I'm coming to an educational institution, so I'll have the presentation teach something from my learnings. It's not scientific, it's not academic, it's just the learnings that we had, because we're basically doing a product that is already, every time we tell people about what we're doing, they say, well, they already have GPS watches for kids. So I'm kind of giving you my perspective and how we actually have been pretty successful with it. So our mission was to create the world's best child tracker. Now, the idea, as many of you might know, came to us from losing a child in a crowded place for 10 minutes. And I think it's something that every parent goes through, and every uncle maybe when they take out their nieces, nephews, like I did. And you just lose them for a few minutes, and you think the world just ended. Or I think the most typical Israeli case is the beach. Every time I go to the beach, I hear the microphone there. So how do we do this? I'm going to start with my conclusion, because it's important to keep this in mind as I'm talking about what we did. So the conclusion is, in order to actually build a product, and when I'm talking about a product, it's usually software, but here I'm talking about hardware, you need money. So money is the most important thing, and don't be fooled. I mean, not having it makes life a lot harder. Having perseverance, which means you go the extra mile. You stay late at work, you do the extra presentation. When somebody calls you in the morning to go to Haifa when you're supposed to be in Khulon, you do that. So sorry I'm late. And of course, you have to have belief. You have to really believe in what you're doing. And we love our children very much, all the founders, so we really believe we're doing it for them. Not only we hope to make money and buy them bigger toys, but also we want to know where they are at all times. So, oh, I'm sorry. I have to mention knowledge, because knowledge is very important. I don't buy the cases of, an 11-year-old kid who never went to college, never learned engineering, suddenly starting a startup and selling it for billions of dollars. Knowledge is really important, but I think knowledge comes with a territory. And I actually am kind of amused. So the previous speaker, Daphna, I wanted to tell you to say hi to Dor. We worked together at Alcatel Lucent. So that's where he got some of his knowledge to have his startup, and that's where I got my knowledge as well. So it's very important. Kids go to school, is really. So these are the steps. They're not chronological, and what I mean by that is, when you have a startup, of course you have to have the idea, you have to have the discussions, you have to talk to people, you have to talk to your partners. If you're doing it on your own, you have to talk to your family, friends, but you're always selling, meaning you're always selling the idea. So even though you don't have a physical product, you're still selling. So these are really what we found out were our milestones on how to get to the next level to be taken seriously. Because when you come with a PowerPoint, used to be a time we'd get $1 million like nothing. Today it's much harder. And we went through the much harder. So the first step, PowerPoint, design ideas, just sitting, having coffee with your partners. Maybe you take an office, maybe you don't, and just start the discussion. We want to do the best child tracking device on the market. What do we do? So these are the challenges that we came up with. The list is actually 100 more items, but these are the big ones. First of all, it has to be small. So when we looked at what was in the market, the devices were pretty big. And what we came up with was a lot smaller. So here is our latest model. It's really the smallest one you can get. It has a SIM card inside, so it works everywhere. There's cellular connectivity, it has Wi-Fi, it has Bluetooth, and it also displays the time. So it goes together with an app that we developed. It's very easy, or much easier to develop an app in Israel. I'll tell you that. I lived in New York. Very expensive to get programmers there. When we got to Israel, one programmer just built the app in a matter of months. So having a small, has to be childish, has to be nice colors. We had a collaboration with DreamWorks, so we actually have watches that have the trolls on them. So that was also important to be a childish design. Then those two are for the kids, for the parents. You have to have a device that actually works. So every time I hear, oh, there's a bunch of Chinese manufacturers, you can buy them for 30 bucks. I have all of them. You're welcome to my office, and I'll show you one by one why they don't work. They do not work. I think it has a lot to do with the fact that they're not focusing on the software and the parental side. They just put a bunch of components in a watch and say it's a child tracker. But that's not how it works. It actually has to have the whole system that works. And of course, you have to have value. You can't price this at $10,000, although I promise you there's parents that lose their kids that will pay $10,000 for a device, but it has to be cheap enough. We're currently selling our devices for $199 on Amazon, and we're hoping to lower that to $99. So these are the outputs from our step one. These are our initial design ideas. We looked at what kids like to wear. At first we thought, should we make it a bracelet? Should we make it a watch? Should we have it as a beeper style? We decided on a watch because that was kind of the hot word. This was right before Apple came out with their Apple Watch. And it has to fit a kid, so we looked at, turns out that American children have much thicker wrists than European children. Really? Yeah, it's, I think it has to do with the whole obesity problem, but that was something we learned. We looked at all our competitors, and our first design right here has all the green, which means we want to beat them on all these fronts that we believe are the most important. This is part of our PowerPoint presentation to investors, to prospective money sources, and we were just always selling. We had a very busy desk full of ideas and information, and we put it together in a presentation. On the bottom right side, you see our latest design, which again, we kind of went back to phase one when our first model didn't work up to our expectation. Very important, I think, for hardware, and where I noticed that we were taken a lot more seriously, was when we actually came with what we want to be the final product. So this is a mock-up. Here's the first two that we received. You can see the evolution. The one actually on the right is a working prototype. Not prototype, a working product. Against our competitors, some of you might know this, actually an Israeli company. We just wanted to be a lot smaller and work. So that's also important if you're in the hardware. Just like with software, you'll bring up slides with just a flow chart of what your app might look like. The next step is, of course, to make it work. So this is after a long and exhausting R&D process. I have pictures. This was very nostalgic for me. These are some pictures that are like 4 or 5 years old. The first model we received, which is an engineering design, worked flawlessly until we put the electronics into the plastic. It stopped working, and then we started having some manufacturing issues. But the bottom line is that we actually had a product that works. It was connecting to an app. It showed a location. And when we started getting some history, when I drove up north and I showed people what it looked like, it was very impressive. And your office at this point should look like this. A bunch of electronics all over the place, glue, and you're putting it together. This is the phase two to be taken seriously. Of course, we had the feature set that was always important from the get-go of what we wanted in this device. Step three, and again, we started this while we were also doing the prototype, is what about manufacturing? How do you get to scale? Scale is very, very hard. So here we have pictures of our visits to China. We were lucky enough to work with engineers that knew factories in China. So we went to our screen manufacturer. We had a lot of issues with them. Our engineers put a big, huge picture of what the screen is. They're showing the Chinese engineers on the assembly line, this is our problem, how do we fix it? And within 2 hours, you're fixing issues that on email would take 2 months. This is actually an Israeli factory. They did our packaging here. So manufacturing is very important to actually have a good relationship and to get that going and to get their commitment for scale. However, working with Chinese manufacturers directly is not always easy. And we were lucky enough, because we concurrently we were selling, that we were noticed by the world's second largest manufacturer, a company by the name of Flex. So that's where I just came from. You'll see tomorrow in the press, they announced a design center in Haifa. If you need the introduction, I'll introduce you to the guy. He's a really nice guy. But this is the Flex homepage. This is my partner's son. So he was actually featured on a $26 billion company. That's bigger than any Israeli company, including Teva. They're huge. They're the number 2 EMS, electronic manufacturing service in the world. And they took notice of us. And when suddenly you have a company like that on your side, everybody takes you seriously. All your suppliers suddenly answer the phone. They say, OK, you can have better payment terms. And this is just an example of the manufacturing assembly line, which started in October. It still has a few issues. We're still kind of like in almost the end of the production run phase. But that kind of brought us to the next level. Now, the fourth and most important part of this all is, I call it marketing, sales, whatever you want to call it. I call it life. You go to sleep thinking about how do you promote your product. You go to all these events that you get invited to see maybe there'll be some kind of a breakthrough. It's one of the best movies quotes, if you know, that's Alec Baldwin from Glenn something, but that's right. Where he says, ABC, always be closing, always be selling your product. And people will try to bring you down. Your wife will tell you when are you going to start making money, and you have to sell it in your own home, outside, to friends, etc. And all this selling will turn into something. You will see. When we went with our campaign, our crowdfunding campaign, we had prototypes that we showed, and I guess we were lucky enough. It just got picked up. It was the hottest word back then was watches, children tracking. We were really the first one to come up with a complete solution and small. And suddenly, with the help of some friends in PR, we get written up in the top sources in the world: BBC, Fox Business, The Marker, Idiot. Everyone wrote about us. Our web guys did a calculation on how much exposure we got. It's 280 million views that we've gotten since 2014. So that's a sizable chunk, and we also see that in sales. We sold in over 60 countries, starting with a crowdfunding campaign, which was successful. It was not profitable, for sure, but it was successful because we reached our goal and beyond, and we were picked up by news outlets in Israel and abroad. And I guess the highlight of recent is that we were featured in Harrods, because they saw this, they saw the solution, they saw that it works, and they said, this is a high-end product, we want to feature it in our store. So we were featured right before the Christmas shopping season last November. Okay. So those are the 4 pillars, I would say. They're not in order, because you're always selling, you're always discussing, but they're very important. But at the end of the day, you have to keep in mind that hardware is very hard. And I tell you the truth, if I were back 5 years ago, I don't know if I would do this again. It's very, very hard, because just thinking about the little changes you have to do, it's suddenly 6 months. So we wanted to incorporate Wi-Fi. What's the problem? Just let's put Wi-Fi in our device. We thought it would take a month. It took 6 months. That's 6 months of salary. That's 6 months of rent. That's 6 months of people, your investors saying, well, you said February, what happened? So it's very hard. It's not like software. I think there's a reason that everybody goes to software, because you sit at home and you just program it. So that's something to keep in mind that we always have. And going back to my conclusion from the beginning was that money, so you'll see it's giant sucking sound. It just money, 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 money. Perseverance, really going the extra mile, and the belief. Because you have to believe. There will be people, there will be times where you just will stop to believe. And you have to have good partners to bring you back on board, or you just have to take a little break and say, I'm coming back refreshed, and I'm going to succeed. You know, so that's it.